مرحبا وأهلا بكم في برنامج داخل واشنطن. معكم مضيفكم روبرت ساتلوف. في أمريكا ليس لأخبار حديث طوال الوقت إلا عن ترامب، مع بضع دقائق مخصصة للحديث عن هيلاري كلينتون وحملتها للترشح للرئاسة، التي وإن كانت تركز على السياسات إلا أنها تخلو من الإثارة. على مدار الأشهر القليلة المقبلة سيتشبع 100 مليون ناخب عبر التلفزيون والإذاعة والإنترنت بالإنباء أشرس معركة سياسية في التاريخ. ولكن في أمريكا من الأحداث ما يفوق انتخاباتنا الرئاسية. ستجري كذلك انتخابات على ثلث مقاعد مجلس الشيوخ ومجلس النواب بالكامل، إضافة إلى 12 من بين 50 من حكام الولايات. وفي الوقت نفسه الكونغرس والرئيس الحالي باراك أوباما أمامهم الكثير من العمل في كل المجالات، بداية من تمويل ميزانياتنا القومية ووصولا إلى محاربة فيروس زيكو. ثم بطبيعة الحال يوجد أهم بند ضمن أجندة أمريكا لهذا الصيف: من سيبرز باعتباره الفائز المرشح بطولة العالم للبيسبول لهذا العام. لمناقشة كل ما هو مهم في أمريكا هذا الصيف بخلاف انتخاباتنا الرئاسية، يسرني أن أرحب بلجنتنا التي تضم الخبيرين السياسيين نورمان أورنستين وستيف كليمنز. Welcome back to Dakhel, Washington. I'm sitting with our panel of political experts to talk a bit of politics beyond our presidential election. Yes, there is politics beyond Donald and Hillary. Let's talk a bit about all those other elections that are going to happen in November and what's happening over the summer in advance of these elections. Senate, House, governors. Now, there's a certain idea out there that because Donald Trump will be at the top of the Republican ticket, that everybody down below is going to suffer. All those Republican House Senate candidates. Are there any data and polls to back up this contention? Norm, I'll start with you.
What we do see is that Republicans who are very vulnerable in the Senate. Remember the way American elections work. We have 100 senators with 6-year terms, and a third of the Senate is up every 2 years. So the presidential year, you get a third that happened to be up 6 years before. This was a election that Republicans did very well in, the first election after Barack Obama. They have 24 of the 34 seats up. And we know that in a number of them, you have Republican senators who have been underwater. Many of these are states that are blue, as we say, that are more favorable to Democrats. And there is a fear that Trump will drive them down even further. What is going to happen, Rob, is that a lot of the money that is out there that was going to go to the presidential race is going to go into these Senate races. And there are a number of vulnerable House Republicans as well, but many fewer proportionally. And they're going to try and drive up the turnout and make sure that Republicans who are disillusioned or demoralized because of Trump still go out to the polls and still vote for those Senate candidates. The Koch brothers, who are notorious in America, very, very wealthy people, have amassed with some of their allies almost $900 million, and probably $300 or $400 million will go into those Senate races in advertising and get out the vote efforts.
Steve, so do you think this is a serious concern for Republicans at the congressional and Senate level?
I think it's a very serious concern. I think I've been hearing that there are efforts right now in some Republican circles to encourage their voters to vote down ticket, not vote in the presidential race, but vote down ticket, which is something I've never heard of before, and I don't know how viral that will be, how it will stick. But I think that the concern that Donald Trump can infect or basically alienate people who are out there and keep them from coming along the way. I agree with Norm completely that there are efforts to sort of drive money a different direction. to change the political dynamic so that you get more of a local and regional focus. But the fact is, Donald Trump is the greatest show on earth right now. And so as much as they try, and as much as I think that everything Norm said is right, the cameras and the attention, for better and for worse, are going to continue to be very much on what Donald Trump represents.
Is this a parallel phenomenon? I mean, Hillary Clinton is only slightly behind Donald Trump in being a disliked candidate, and her party is divided. Are Democratic down ticket candidates going to suffer as well?
Not so much.
Right.
And a part of what's going on here is not just the Republican fear that their voters won't turn out, but a fear that Democrats, especially minority Democrats, and that means Muslim Americans as well as Asian Americans, African Americans, Hispanic Americans, are going to turn out in larger numbers than they would normally turn out, and more of them will vote for Democrats. And a fear that if they vote for Clinton, which is as much as anything for some of them a vote against Trump, that they'll stick with the party down ticket as well. So one of the things we're going to see here, by the way, is in some of the vulnerable states where Republicans have the machinery of power, like Ohio, voter suppression efforts. So the Republicans in Ohio, where they have a vulnerable senator, Rob Portman, who's running for re-election, have just purged the voter rolls of about 150,000 people, the majority of them Democrats, and they're trying to find ways to make sure that they depress that turnout.
And I think the other thing to keep in mind is that we're seeing a lot of the similar dynamic as between Hillary and Obama now with Hillary and Bernie Sanders, in the sense that while things look hot and while you've got very upset, disaffected Bernie supporters, at the end of the day, and you did with Hillary Clinton, I won't say it on air, but there was a group called Puma that was so upset with the dynamics between Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama in 2008 that they actually became John McCain supporters and spent a lot of time on Fox News, just to basically show that they were upset about they were inconsequential. They made news, but they were inconsequential. Hillary Clinton is not just a single person. She is a huge franchise of relationships where the Clinton partnership has hired and placed people throughout the political infrastructure of the United States. And all of that is going to be a very big strength. It's something Donald Trump doesn't have. If Bernie Sanders had come in, he doesn't have it. It's truly, in a way, reminiscent of the kind of machine politics that a Kennedy would have had or something like that. So a lot of the tension we see in the Democratic race is going to be taken over by the reality that nobody has the muscle and skeletal structure politically that the Clinton team has.
All right, so let's help our viewers if they want to follow a couple of Senate races that might be a useful judge as to these deeper trends. They're not going to follow only Hillary and Trump because of the personalities, but if they want to follow a couple of Senate races, pick one or two that they should follow.
Well, the one I'm watching right now, because she's scrambling and she's in real trouble, but I've never seen anyone work as hard as Kelly Ayotte right now in New Hampshire to keep her job. It's a very, very tough situation for her. It's a Northeast. She's a Republican. But if there was going to be, if there was a bellwether race that I find interesting, that's one.
You know, it's interesting. I testified in the Senate Budget Committee several weeks ago, and Senator Ayotte came in and just looked terrible. I mean, she's clearly under enormous stress. I would look to Pennsylvania, which is a bellwether state, one where Trump might do a little bit better, but where Pat Toomey, a quite conservative Republican senator in a state that otherwise has tilted more towards the Democrats, is in a tough contest. And Ohio I mentioned, but also Florida. Florida, where Marco Rubio's seat is the one that's in contest, and there, because you have not just a group of Cuban Americans who've been the most dominant or prominent figures in the Hispanic world, but an even larger number of non-Cubans, not just from Puerto Rico and Mexico, a lot of them from Guatemala or even from South America, who are eligible to vote. And that's a state that Republicans thought they would be able to hold quite easily, and now they're nervous about it.
And if I can put the point on Pat Toomey in Pennsylvania, he teamed up with Joe Manchin after the Sandy Hook disaster.
Your favorite West Virginia senator.
Yeah, when I find Joe Manchin fascinating, but Toomey walked over the line against where the National Rifle Association and the gun lobby wanted him to go, and teamed up with Manchin to try to put forward the most minimal kind of reporting in gun, I won't even call it regulation, but sort of the gun industry, and he's paying a price for that today. So it's one of these real hot wire subjects where you're seeing that leadership, even among a very conservative senator running, is now costing him a lot for what he did previously.
Well, let me mention one other, which is Arizona, and somebody who a lot of your viewers are going to be familiar with, John McCain, who has faced a lot of pressure from his own right. He's older now, of course. He's vulnerable because he's compromised at times in the past. He endorsed Trump, but to a group of Republican supporters privately, he said, I'm in real trouble because what Trump has done is to activate the Hispanic voters in Arizona to a level we've never seen before. And that could not only affect his chances, but affect mine in Arizona. So if McCain goes down, the Republicans are going to have a very bad night in the Senate.
You've just identified 4 or 5 Republican incumbents who could be in trouble. I'm not going to hold you to it, but when you look out today toward November, do the Republicans still hold the United States Senate?
No.
Probably not. You know, if Hillary Clinton wins, Democrats need to pick up 4 seats net. If she loses, they need 5. If she wins, the likelihood of getting the net of 4 or more is extremely high, because there's only one vulnerable Democratic seat, and that's the open seat that Harry Reid, the Democratic leader, is leaving in Nevada. And there are now 7, 8, or 9 Republican seats in play.
So Democrats take the Senate.
Democrats take the Senate. Okay. When we come back when we come back in just a moment, we're going to ask if the Republicans also lose the House. We're going to talk for a moment about states and governors, and then maybe there's actually some governing that has to be done in the last few months of this year. In just a minute. Again, my panelists include Norman Ornstein. Norm is a resident scholar at the American Enterprise Institute, an election analyst for CBS News, and a contributor to the National Journal and Atlantic magazines. His book is called It's Even Worse Than It Looks: How the American Constitutional System Collided with the New Politics of Extremism. I understand that Mr. Trump's picture is going on the new version. Steve Clemens, sitting to Norm's left, is with us. Steve is Washington editor-at-large for The Atlantic and editor of Atlantic Live. He's also a senior fellow and founder of the American Strategy Program at the New America Foundation, a prominent think tank here in Washington. Steve writes and speaks frequently about the Washington political scene, foreign policy, and national security issues. So, Steve, let me begin with you. The Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, just recently and finally endorsed Donald Trump. Will he still be Speaker of the House after this next election?
Well, we have a lot to see. I mean, I don't think that the Republicans have anyone else that could stand in that place. We saw how painful it was to get anyone to take that job or to be accepted in the job. And while Paul Ryan is holding his nose in endorsing Donald Trump also doesn't really know these caucuses. He doesn't know the people in place, and so it would be unbusinesslike of him to dump Ryan. So I think Ryan has a good chance of staying in place.
But your point is that you still think the Republicans will be in the majority.
I do believe right now, as we look at it, unless there's a complete meltdown, which is very hard to predict, that the Republicans will keep the House, the Democrats will get the Senate, we'll have a split Congress.
Norm?
I think that's very likely the case. House races are a harder hurdle. They tend to be more homogeneous now. They tend to be much more firmly in the camp of one party or the other. Democrats need to pick up 30 seats. Right. Now, it's potentially doable. There are probably at this point about 35 to 40 Republican seats in play. There are probably 10 or 15 Democratic seats in play. They'd have to win everything, including ones that are very steeply uphill battles. There might be a meltdown. I think it's unlikely, given all the outside money that will go into these contests, and given that Democrats don't have the strongest candidates in some of these areas. But it's very likely that Democrats will pick up seats and the number of Republicans in the House will be reduced. And that in turn will make the task of Speaker Ryan, assuming he is still Speaker, a tougher one. Why? Because Ryan's problem, his headache, has come from his own caucus. It's from his own right. It's the radical right, the so-called Freedom Caucus. The people who are leaving, we already know we have a number of retirees, and those who are most vulnerable tend to be those who support the leadership. So proportionally, even though the numbers will be smaller, the radical right caucus is going to be more prominent, and that will make governing for Ryan just an enormous headache.
Okay, sounds like this is an important issue to watch, which actually leads me to my question about governance and not just politics. So Steve, are there any, is there going to be any legislation, any governance that is going to be done over the next few months? Or is this all put on hold pending the election?
Yeah, before we just came out to talk to you, Norm Ornstein and I were speaking about some of the things that were pending out there, and he's got his own list, and criminal justice reform and others. The one I've been following mostly because I find it so interesting if it doesn't move forward is the Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP, which Mitch McConnell, in a way, informally committed a vote on during the lame duck session. We have two candidates right now, leading candidates, that have moved away from the trade debate. We have the dynamics of what Bernie Sanders has brought to the Democratic Party that makes it very hard to imagine trade legislation passing. But let's imagine what the world looks like if it doesn't pass. You essentially are forfeiting to China a significant agent. We have more national security people who've signed on supporting TPP than economists, because they look at the consequences to the United States as significant, and that will then unplug probably the efforts to basically do a larger US-European deal. It may sound wonky, but it is a hugely significant issue.
For you, trade is the key.
Yeah,
is the key test.
And whether it passes in that lame duck session or not, which I think there'll be a vote.
Norm?
So, Rob, back in May, I wrote a piece in The Atlantic suggesting that this Congress could go down as the worst ever because there are a number of things, urgent priorities that they have failed to address or addressed very, very poorly. The Zika virus, which has been a serious, serious problem. Puerto Rico, which has suffered mightily because of an economic collapse and is on the verge of bankruptcy, and obviously is under the aegis of the United States. The opioid crisis, we have a terrible set of problems there. Mental health issues that are really, really difficult ones. And Congress just keeps doing next to nothing.
And criminal justice reform.
Criminal justice reform. Now, there's still a little time left. And as Steve mentioned, a lame duck session, which is a session this Congress stays in until January 3rd, even though the election is in early November. They will come back and they will do some more things, and maybe some of this will get done, but it might be too little, too late. And they've been unable to deal with the fundamental spending issues, and we're going to have potentially on October 1, when the new fiscal year begins, a showdown with maybe even a partial government shutdown weeks before the election, which could have its own impact on the election outcome.
I should say that the far-right caucus that Norm said has been lobbying the leadership, the Republican leadership, to prevent a lame duck session from even seating. They don't have the numbers to do that, but it just shows that we're going to see these fireworks nonetheless. But what I hope for is on some of these, where you even have the Koch brothers, who've been the sort of financial engine of so many people on the right, pushing criminal justice reform. It's one of the things that everyone thought would get done, now looks in jeopardy. And so it continues this story of fragmentation in the Congress, which is very dramatic. But those zombie congressmen, zombie senators who lose their seats and who no longer have to be accountable to voters. These are not zombies, but they lose the election, but they still have authority and a vote through January 3rd. And that gives them an opportunity to be responsible, to deal responsibly with legislation and do their jobs until the final day. So we'll see if the zombies get an opportunity to prove themselves in that final session.
Okay, gentlemen, I only have a few seconds left. And since we're talking about important things in America over the summer, I have to ask you, so who is going to end the summer winning the American and National Leagues and going to the World Series?
Well, don't forget that's not going to happen until October, so it's not the summer. I am hoping that our Washington Nationals will be the National League champions going to the World Series. The Chicago Cubs, a team which has been hapless for many, many decades, though looks like the strongest team in baseball right now. Anything can happen, however, in baseball, more even than in politics.
I will share with you, when I was a young man and had an odd opportunity to meet Richard Nixon, it was an awkward meeting because all he wanted to do was talk about sports. And I said, Mr. President, I was raised in Japan and I only know about sumo. We just changed then to other subjects. So I have no idea who's even in the race.
Excellent, excellent.
And you, what do you think?
Oh, I'm always going to root for the Red Sox and a Nationals World Series. I think that would be absolute
That would
heaven.
be heaven. That would be heaven.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Look
Thank
forward
you.
to having you back to talk about the next phase of this wonderful political season that we're in.
Excellent. Thank you.
بهذا نصل إلى نهاية هذه الحلقة من برنامج داخل واشنطن. إذا كانت لديكم أي استفسارات أو تعليقات حول هذه الحلقة وخاصة حول أهمية الحكومة المحلية في نظامنا السياسي، أرجو أن تراسلوني مباشرة على عنوان البريد الإلكتروني التالي insidewashington@alhurra.com. معكم روبرت ساتلوف. شكرا لكم وإلى اللقاء.